If you're thinking about buying a house, you probably have an overprotective dad or uncle that says,
I would never buy a property subject free.
what the hell is a subject anyway? And why are they free? Well, in this video, I'm going to tell you all about what the industry refers to as a subject. And not only that, I'll also tell you what the most common subjects are, who they benefit, and if they really are free. And speaking of free, you know what else is free? Subscribing to this channel. So please go ahead right now, subscribe to the channel. It absolutely means the world to me. And if you subscribe right now, I'm going to throw in one free like button that you can redeem right now just by going down and clicking that little thumbs up. So thank you very much for doing that. And now on to the subject of subjects. When you're thinking about buying a property, you're going to write down on paper an offer, and hopefully it gets accepted, and that is referred to as the contract of purchase and sale. This contract basically only contains two things. One of those things is called terms. The other is called conditions. Terms can refer to lots of things like price and the date of when you're going to move into the property, or even something as simple as if the property will be left in clean and tidy condition. Basically, the term terms refers to anything that either party agrees to do and by when. But the subject of subjects is more easily defined as conditions. Conditions are things in the contract that need to be satisfied in order for the contract to continue. Most commonly in my marketplace of Surrey and in BC for that matter, they start off something like this: subject to the buyer
Or
seller doing such and such by such and such a date. And if that subject
or
condition is not satisfied by that date, then the contract is null and void. So now let me give you an example of a real condition that you might insert into your offer so you can better understand it. And I'm going to read it here for you. Subject to the buyer on or before August 5th, 2021, obtaining and approving an inspection report at the expense of the buyer against any defects which may reasonably adversely affect the property's use or value. This subject is for the sole benefit of the buyer. That is a subject to inspection, but another way to think about a subject
or
condition is to think of it as some sort of due diligence or a task that one of the parties has to complete before continuing with the purchase or sale. The most common subjects in my marketplace are, first of all, financing. You want to make sure that the bank is okay with both yourself and the property. Second is inspection. You want to make sure that the property is in good shape. Third, we're probably going to look at some sort of property disclosure from the seller talking about the condition and the history of the property. Fourth, we're going to review the title to make sure, well, all sorts of things, what easements might be on the property or that the registered owner is actually who they say they are. And fifth, we're going to verify that we can get proper insurance on the property. And if you're looking at any sort of strata property, you're likely going to want to review all of the strata's documents and information. So you're going to make it subject to strata document approval. Now, these are by no means the only conditions, but they're just the most common ones we see. And most commonly, conditions are for the benefit of the buyer. The reason for this is that if you're selling a property, there's probably not a lot of due diligence you need to do in order to actually get the property sold. But if you're the buyer, you don't know anything about that property, so you'll want to find out more. This means that usually if you accept an offer as a seller, you don't have the right to back out because you said, yeah, I agree to this. However, if you're a buyer, you likely have some sort of conditions, unless the market's really, really hot, you're going to have some sort of conditions in there to do your due diligence because, as I said, you don't know much about the property. And if the buyer
or
seller has any sort of condition in the contract for their benefit, that is when they still have the ability to get out of the deal if they need to, or determine that the property or sale isn't worth it. Most commonly, the buyer will get somewhere between 3 and 7 business days to make sure they got all their ducks in a row, make sure their financing is all set and that the bank will lend them money for the property, but also to probably do an inspection and make sure that the property is not a lemon. Now, again, sellers may have conditions, but it's not super common, so I'm not going to cover that here in this video. If you have questions about that, maybe you should comment down below or reach out because it's likely something more for a private conversation. But either way, once the buyer
or
seller removes their condition from the contract and all the conditions have been removed from the contract, that is when the contract becomes firm and binding, otherwise known as, hey, the property's sold. So that's what they mean by subject free. No, not at all. Subject free is what we refer to in the industry as an offer that comes in that originally has no conditions in it whatsoever. Now, your dad and the news both think that subject free means that the buyer has done no due diligence whatsoever and that they're coming to the table with all cash. Well, let me tell you, that is rarely ever the case. If you're in a hot market and you're getting good service and advice from your real estate agent, as well as cooperation from the seller, the seller's agent, and even your mortgage broker, at that point, you can likely do most of your due diligence in advance of writing an offer. This means that if you've got a chance to do all your research about financing and the property in advance of the offer, you can come to the negotiation table with an offer that has absolutely no conditions whatsoever and only terms, putting yourself in the strongest position that a buyer can be in when in multiple offers. Because if you are in a seller's market, you have to put yourself in the seller's shoes. If the seller gets two offers that come in, one is yours and one is from a competing party, and yours has a condition in it, maybe for 5 or 6 days, and the other one is unconditional, let's say for instance they're the exact same price, which one do you think the seller is going to take? The one that gets the job done right now and the property is sold, or the one where they may have to wait a while to find out that either the property is sold or they have to start the whole process all over again? Another thing to consider is that not all subjects are free. And let me give you an example. A home inspection these days is probably going to cost you about $500. Now, if you insert the home inspection clause into your offer in a competing offer situation, you may not get the property because the other offer may be unconditional or they may have already done their inspection. So if you paid $500 for the inspection now, not knowing if you're going to get the property, that's not really how most people like to do it. What they like to do is insert the inspection clause into the contract and then be given a certain amount of days in order to pay that $500. But again, let's go back and say one has already done their inspection or they're not doing an inspection because, I don't know, the guy's a builder, and then you come in and you do have the inspection clause. You have to again put yourself in the seller's situation or the seller's shoes. If you were that seller, how much more would you expect to be paid from the buyer with the condition in order to wait a week or 2 or 3 to find out whether or not your property is sold? $1,000, $5,000, $10,000, $20,000? So rather than spending that $500 now, you have to ask yourself, how much is that condition going to cost you if you insert it into the contract and manage to become the winning bidder? Because no seller in their right mind is ever going to accept a conditional offer if they have an unconditional offer on the table, unless that conditional offer is actually a much bigger and better offer and results in a higher selling price or other more favorable terms. So there you go. A subject is actually a condition inserted into your offer in the contract of purchase and sale. And remember, subjects are not always as free as subscribing to this channel. If you could, please just hit the like button before you go, and we'll see you in a couple of days.